Hello out there. Welcome.
Hi.
Welcome to a StreamCast on a let's see, we were going to stream Thursday last week and then we streamed on Friday, right? And then now it's Wednesday.
I mean, the only way I ever know what day of the week it is for my pill caddy. That's how old I am now.
I have long since had like alarms on my phone set by like day for me because I know. All right, we got Brennan in the chat, we got Ian in the chat, we got Mr. Rez in the chat, and Oh So Edgy in the chat. Welcome so far, all the people who are here. So I don't know if it's super obvious from the title or whatnot, but I kind of wanted to talk about this because in Catalyst right now, which I'm reading for our book club, there's been a lot of discussion about, from Galen's side of things, Galen or so, about the Jedi having kyber crystals. In Catalyst, they are using kyber crystals to make the weapon for the Death Star. And the question comes up all the time, how do Jedi maintain control over kyber crystals, and how they didn't really let the rest of the galaxy use kyber crystals, that they kept a lot of information for themselves, largely because they could connect to the crystals with the Force and others couldn't. But it got me thinking about the kind of all the special things that the Jedi had, that they had these temples all over the place, and it had to be outside of government jurisdiction, right? To like just pop up a temple somewhere. They had access to all of these crystals. They wouldn't share the information. And so often when we talk about the Jedi, stuff like the Clone Wars comes up. Like, we have a stream already where we talked about if the Jedi should have gone to war and that sort of thing. But I just kind of wanted to just have a conversation about what secrets are the Jedi allowed to have? I mean, like, we know what secrets they have, but like, where are the ethics and where is like the trust involved, or are they actually the better protectors of some of this technology than not? Which is kind of like my big long spiel as to what I thought would be fun to talk about this week.
Yeah. Well, and just right off the bat, I think one thing that I want us to talk about, and we don't have to start here, but I'm interested in if it's different that the Jedi keep secrets than that the Sith keep secrets.
Ooh, that's
right? Like, I'm curious if that secrecy is the same, or if it is a different type of thing. Because I kind of think that it's a different sort of thing, even though like the action is largely the same. But I'm curious. We've not discussed this, so I really don't know what you think about this at all.
Usually, these conversations come out of like Django and I have had a conversation off the stream, just talking about Star Wars, and like, oh, we should do this on stream. But I'm really excited for this because I actually don't know how I feel about a lot of this. I've presented some of these questions in the book club because I think they're interesting questions, but those videos are not the best format to like. It would be such a tangent from talking about the book itself. So like, I thought here's the good. I like that element with the Sith too, because that was not something that has crossed my mind to get to that. But I guess where it comes down to is I feel like it kind of comes down to how do you feel about Jedi, right? Because on the one hand, you can say, well, kyber crystals could be used for energy, like that's what Galen is kind of being lied to be told that that's what he's doing in Catalyst, and like have this really good renewable energy source to like help all these backwater worlds. But you know, it's like, were the Jedi selfish to hide knowledge, right? If one of the tenets of the Jedi code is there is no ignorance, there is knowledge, and the Jedi are supposed to go out and like help the galaxy, is it counter to them to hide this information? But then on the flip side, the first time mortals, for lack of a better word, like get use of kyber crystals, they build the Death Star, right? So it's like, well, how dare you keep the secret? Also, I'm going to make a planet killer with this secret. And I kind of want to look at it. I'm kind of curious, does that matter? Does it matter that the first thing regular people do with kyber crystals is make a Death Star? Or do ethics exist outside of the context in which the galaxy gets kybers?
Well, I think part of this gets to the reason that I think the Jedi keep secrets in the first place is I think that the Jedi logic, their explanation for why they would keep certain things a secret is that some types of knowledge are dangerous to have, right? And the Sith, I think, keep secrets because they want an exclusive right to power, right? Like they want to keep secrets from other people so that they are not threatened, whereas the Jedi want to keep secrets from people so that the people who don't have this knowledge are not threatened themselves, right? And I think about like the Bogan collection, right? In Jedi Lost.
I'll throw up the card. There we go.
There you go. Because like that's secrets that the Jedi are keeping from themselves, right? And some Jedi even want to specifically like study these types of things to use as like weapons and protection against the Sith, but Jedi philosophy says no, this type of knowledge is just not proper for anyone, right? And so like I think I think the ethical answer is, or the ethical question is answered by in a large part, or at least they think it is. Whether or not it's sufficient is a different question. But I keep it a secret in the first place, and I think the Jedi would say, whether or not they're right, I think they would say that their reasoning is because they're doing it to protect someone else.
Right. Well, and it's just like what I was saying. I think it's one of the coolest things about the Death Star now is that it's basically a giant lightsaber gun. Like that's just kind of this crazy way to think about it now.
Right.
But like that's the level of power the Kybers have, and like Gandalf talks about in Catalyst, like his problem isn't getting power or coaxing power from the Kybers. His problem is containing the power, and like that's what's holding it back. Because that's how powerful they are. And so there's that danger element where the Jedi would be afraid of something being used this way, especially because like when you look at prequel era Jedi, they think the Sith are extinct, so they don't think that there's anybody else that has knowledge on how to use these crystals. And something like a lightsaber, which can just cut through buildings, would be dangerous, even if you're not building a planet killer. Just look at somebody like General Grievous, who isn't Force sensitive, and the damage he's able to do with that kind of technology. And on the one hand, you have that fear, but then I think there's that other level, like what you were talking about with the Bogan collection, where the Jedi even try to keep secrets of dark side stuff away from light siders, rather than let them make that decision for themselves. And I think that kind of, in a way, it feeds. Like, I want to be able to have this discussion separate from like a particular era of Jedi, which is hard because right now in canon we only have really one era until High Republic comes out, or we see more from like Luke's temple or Rey's eventual order. But like, I also feel like this discussion is impossible to separate from prequel era Jedi, because I feel like the prequel era Jedi, so much of where they went wrong is that they were afraid and didn't realize they were afraid, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's the discussion of this stuff is dangerous. I mean, even right now, there's technology that governments have that you're not supposed to be able to just Google to know how they work. Whether or not you can, but you're not supposed to be able to. So there's that argument, but then I think there's also the Jedi kind of fearing any other. It's really probably more of a Force-sensitive group, but like anybody else gaining access to this, and then after so long of not having true enemies.
Right. Well, and I think to use a different example outside of the prequel trilogy era, I think another thing that comes to mind for me when I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about is Atris in I was going to say The Force Unleashed 2, but in KOTOR 2, which you just finished playing on the channel. Atris is essentially a librarian, right? Like she is, like her job on the Jedi Council, prior to, the Mandalorian Wars and the Jedi Civil War is to, help maintain knowledge, but she ends up hoarding Sith holocrons, which lead to her own corruption, right? And so like there's, again, at least some evidence, and I know, KOTOR is not canonical anymore, but some evidence that there's proof that certain access to certain types of knowledge inherently corrupts. right? And it's it's the idea. Oppenheimer says, when he creates the nuclear bomb, that I've become destroyer of worlds, right? That some things are inherently dangerous,
Yep.
right? And the existence of these things is problematic. But if these things exist, the Jedi's philosophy is, well, then we have to have them because that way we have nobody else that can have them. But we're going to lock them in a closet that you have to have the special sand manipulating lock to get through.
Yep.
Like those sorts of things. Like we have to protect ourselves from them as well. Right. And so it's like some things are so dangerous. And so, like, I think a lot of this, whether or not you believe it's right to keep a secret, depends on whether or not you accept the premise that some things are so powerful that it's best not to know them.
I agree with
right?
that. I think it's based on the premise of what you just said, and I think it's also based on the premise of, do you believe the Jedi should be the arbiters for that? Right? Because it's not even then just Force users. It's like like in Rogue One, Chirrut obviously knows about kybers and he senses Gen kyber, and but he doesn't use a kyber-based weapon, right? So like, I'm kind of led to believe that it's still kind of a Jedi exclusive thing, even though the Jedi don't have exclusivity over the Force or the light side, despite what Octo Luke would tell you. So, and like, that's where I kind of wrestle with this, because I am such like a Jedi apologist, and I am such like, no, Jedi are like the best thing in Star Wars, and they're why I love Star Wars, and like Jedi are like the best things ever. But also it's kind of like, but the Jedi are literally like, we're deciding that we're the ones that get to decide. And I'm really interested in where that conversation like came into play. And that probably happened even before High Republic, I would assume.
Right. I mean, and I think one of the downsides of this that you have to, if you're the Jedi, one of the things you have to weigh the secrecy against is that secrecy breeds suspicion. Right? Like, that's how Palpatine is so able to manipulate the public into being skeptical of the Jedi, because they're this secret group. And so it makes a lot of sense that a secret group could use a government conspiracy, right? Like, that's why conspiracy theories in our world works, because like the CIA exists, and if the CIA, it's really easy to believe that maybe there's a super CIA deep state Illuminati kind of thing, right? So like the presence of secrecy, like when you know that there's something that you don't know, it's easy to imagine that there's a lot of things you don't know, and that those things are being manipulated. And so like, I think the Jedi failed to anticipate the way that not everyone saw them as benevolent protectors, but as secret havers. Like, you are keeping something from me that I have a right to have, right? I mean, that's Anakin's whole deal. Anakin wants the knowledge that Palpatine says you can't get from a Jedi, right? A Jedi, it's not that they don't know this, it's that they won't tell you, right? It's not that they could not have given you this information, it's that they won't give you this information.
Yep. Well, and like, that makes me think too about Jedi temples in general. So like, stuff you've seen, to reference Force Unleashed, like Force Unleashed 1, there's, depending on what version you play, it's either in the game or it's a downloadable level for the Jedi Temple. Or what we see in like the Lothal Temple and Rebels, Canonical, where there's so many places that belong to the Jedi that you can only get in with the Force. Like, you have to like, and there's kind of two sides to that. Like, on the one hand, it's this really interesting mystical thing that, as a person who responds to the Jedi and like Jedi in that way, and as a person that finds that sort of thing interesting because I'm a person of faith in my own life, like, I really enjoy that kind of spiritual idea of, you have to tap into this power in order to be able to get into the building. But then there's the flip side of like, well, but if I don't have the power, I can't go in the building. And so it's like, where is it this kind of spiritual metaphor, that's something to be like lauded, and when is it actually elitist in a way? And as Obi-Wan would say, it's a certain point of view kind of a thing.
Right. I mean, and I think that's important too, because you have some of these, but even holocrons, like holocrons are the repository of knowledge, and you can't open them unless you have the right type of abilities, right? Like that's Maul's whole thing in Rebels
Right.
too. Is like I can't open this. Like I need a Jedi to tell me what's in here,
Right.
and then you have the Sith holocron that Ezra messes around with because he's curious what it's about. Like those things are specific. I mean, it's like a book that's in a language you can't read, right? Like if only certain people can have the knowledge of the book,
Right.
then it's going to breed, especially for people who want knowledge,
Right.
even for knowledge's sake, to say, hey, here's some knowledge that you specifically can't have. Right? That's going to breed some sort of resentment.
For sure. In the chat, Dan says Star Wars posted an image of the new High Republic lightsabers now. I did see that. That's very cool. And then John says, makes me wonder if Galactic Republic has their version of a FOIA request, and if so, did it apply to the Jedi? Which is an interesting question.
I mean, I think to the extent that something existed, I mean, I don't know if the Rusan reformations are still canon or not, but whatever equivalent is canon, whatever agreement that the Jedi and the Republic have, I think the Republic probably had to agree at some point. Hey, like you're going to be able to not tell us some of this stuff.
Well, like if you go to like we recently were like I was rewatching Clone Wars before the season came out, which I guess is like 3/4 of a year ago now. I don't know. I have no sense of time right now. But you get to the Ahsoka trial episodes, and I found it interesting in revisiting the episodes that she was really kicked out of the Order, not necessarily because the Jedi thought she was guilty. She was kicked out of the Order because she had to stand trial, and she couldn't stand trial as a Jedi. She had, like, unless I'm misremembering, but it was pretty much they were like, no, there's enough evidence that you've committed this crime that you have to go on trial, and so we are excommunicating you so that you can face trial. So, like, there's clearly some sort of separation between the government, I guess, church and state in a way, of like of government, where the Republic can't come in and just say no, like you have to tell us this stuff. But I too wonder like what that relationship is like, and I guess that's why it was so important for Yoda as Grand Master to have these relationships with chancellors. Like, again, if we look at Jedi Lost, or if we look at Master and Apprentice, like Yoda is always like involved in whatever's going on with the
right.
And you would have.
I mean, and I still maintain that Yoda was grooming Dooku to be Grand Master after him.
I still agree, yeah.
And to the extent that Dooku had those similar political connections, I think that still tracks. That we want to have some sort of relationship here, a working relationship of sorts.
But to go back to what you were saying about the holocrons, hey Cal, welcome. It makes me think of Fallen Order also, because while I was playing that game, I kept saying that it was a mistake to try to find the holocron, because the holocron was hidden in the vault on Bogano. And as it is, it's not just a Force user to get into a holocron. You have to be a light side user to get into a Jedi holocron. You have to face what's inside the vault. I'm like, if you literally just leave the holocron in there, they can't get to it. Like,
right.
Like and then what happens? Of course, Cal gets it, and then Trilla takes it. And so it's just like there's all of this secret kind of stuff. But that's, I don't know, like. I really think it comes down to a much deeper question, which is, did the Jedi, as themselves, have the right to declare themselves arbiters of right and wrong? And I think that gets to a central question in Last Jedi. I think that gets to a central question in the prequel trilogy. It's like, do they have a right to keep secrets? And I guess, like, because I trust Yoda, I'm like, this is fine. But, it's kind of funny, though, because, like, Star Wars me, and I never talk about this kind of thing intentionally, but, like, Star Wars me and, like, real-life political me would be very in disagreement about this particular topic, which is why I think I'm
Right.
dealing with it so much.
Well, and I think it's interesting too to go off of the the holocron with the names,
Yeah.
like the very idea that the Jedi are so interested in literally every person in the galaxy that has force powers because they don't want any other force sect but themselves to exist, right? Like we must know every child
Yep.
so that every child can be a member of our order
Right.
and no other order,
Right.
right? Like that's the idea. There is that we have to protect these children and their families from their abilities.
Yep.
And therefore, we would rather them be a part of our organization to the extent that we don't want anyone else to have this knowledge. I mean, and I guess they end up being right. That's, I guess Fallen Order shows that. But
right. Well, and it's like the one side of that is, and the reason why I've always kind of been okay with how the Jedi do this, even though it's not necessarily the most glorious practice, is this is not a case of like demanding children for tribute or something like that. These are kids where at age 3 they can throw a temper tantrum and wreck your house. And the average parent is not going to know how to handle a 3-year-old having a temper tantrum and breaking the house.
Right.
And you just can't preemptively train every parent for how to handle that. Hold on, I think my internet's taking a hit. Come back, stream. Come back.
It hasn't on Discord anyway.
That's good. OBS was just yelling at me. Okay, I think it's good.
But I think we see that too in Jedi Lost because, like, Dooku's dad, the Count of Sereno, was like, no, get this kid away from me. Like, I want nothing to do with any of this, right? Because I'm skeptical of it or I'm afraid of it. And, like, I think there's a certain logic behind that, though.
Yep, I would agree. So, and I think that's where these type of things get messy. And I think that's, like, so much of what we see with the Jedi is there's kind of these two sides to every coin where you have that, on the one hand, are they protecting the galaxy from kids that would go off the handle if they never received training? Especially when you see somebody like Anakin or somebody like Rey who never had training and didn't. I mean, obviously Anakin did become a Sith Lord, but he didn't become a Sith Lord until after the Jedi training. Like, so, but that's not necessarily going to be the case for everyone. But it's like, on the one hand, there's a really good argument to be made to protect people. But on the other hand, it's like, okay, but then at what point do you run the risk of Jedi actually being baby stealers, as Karen Travis would want to call them? And, so it's something of a conundrum. But it's like I said, with the Jedi, on the one hand, their temples deserve to be protected from people who would just want to raid Jedi temples and come in and get powerful tools. But on the other hand, what level of exclusivity does that make?
Right. I mean, and I think, not to keep just coming back to the same question, but, I think it really does boil down to, are the Jedi the right people to make these decisions? Right. But I think part of the point that Yoda makes to Dooku in Jedi Lost and, in Master and Apprentice in a lot of ways too, is, look, we're not the right people to make these decisions.
Right.
And so, therefore, we're not going to. Like, we're going to create rules that keep us from being in positions to make these decisions. Right. We're going to say, all of this stuff the Republic gets to decide, and all of this stuff we're going to lock in a closet because we're not the people to make these decisions.
Right.
Like we inherently find these things dangerous and problematic in a way that we don't want to be in the position of having to be the arbiters of this. So we're just going to remove ourselves from this equation and let dogma be that deciding factor.
Right. Well, and I think this is what you were referencing. That was a big thing in Master and Apprentice, because it's been the age-old discussion since the prequel trilogy of, like, why didn't the Jedi go and free the slaves on Tatooine, and shouldn't the Jedi be anti-slavery? And that's what Yoda was saying, was like, are we going to be the galactic police that go and wage war based, because that's basically what you would have to do on Tatooine,
right?
Is you would have the Jedi, for all the people who critique the Jedi for going to war in the Clone Wars, the Jedi would have to go to war on Tatooine and kill a bunch of people. To my audio is quite clear to Django. That's fine. I'll turn myself up a little bit. Thank you. I'm just glad you're still with me because my internet did take a hit there. But like, and maybe there's an argument to be made that is a just war on the part of the Jedi versus an unjust war in the Clone War. I don't necessarily know. I think most often the argument is the Jedi shouldn't go to war at all. But that does come down to, are the Jedi the arbiters for the galaxy? Like, when you're saying the Jedi should go out and stop slavery wherever it is, it's like, you got to understand that people who are morally rotten enough to have slaves are not going to go, okay, you're right, we just give up. Like, you will have to fight them because that's how they are, or they wouldn't be people willing to own slaves. And so, that's where a Jedi would have to take action and take an aggressive action. And Yoda, right or wrong, wasn't willing to be the person that made that decision. But they are the people who are willing to make the decision of, we're not going to let you have kyber crystals. I really want to know more, and maybe this is somewhere in canon and I don't know it, but like, do the Jedi have the authority to like take kybers from people? Like, if they knew, like, say you had a cave in your backyard that had kyber crystals in it, and you're like, this is my kyber crystal. Like, are they allowed to like keep the cave, or would the Jedi come in and be like, according to Galactic Code 9977-2355, like, this is now our cave? That I don't actually know.
I think at least by the time of the prequel trilogy, it's likely that they think they have identified every source of kyber in the galaxy.
That's probably true, yeah.
And so, like, I think that's a more interesting question for like an Old Republic, High Republic kind of thing. Because I mean, especially with like Ilum, Ilum is a secret place that's holy to the Jedi.
Yep.
I mean, same with Jeddah, honestly.
Yeah.
Until that system starts to break down. Let's see. Jedi Kyber Crystal. Can't read that. AFT.
Oh, like alcohol, firearms.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. There we go.
Yeah. So would they hunt down? Would they be like, you have this contraband? Blah blah blah. I actually only know what that means because of the movie Deja Vu. So there you go. But oh my darn internet. That's right. But
yeah, ATF.
But
I mean, let me ask you this too. I think this is a related question in a way. Is the Force itself essentially secretive, and does that inform whether or not the Jedi are secretive? And this maybe depends on the extent to which you believe that the Force has an active will.
Mm-hmm.
But like, some people have access to the Force and some people don't. Right. And if the Force itself is a source of knowledge, then the Force is either randomly or intentionally deciding some people get access to this knowledge and some people don't.
Right.
But then also the type of knowledge that is revealed to each person is different. Right? So like, the Wills have a different understanding, and Yoda has to learn from them, right? Like, he has to go get training from them. And, like the Mortis gods, have certain knowledge that they impart to, Ezra, of all people, that let him, go rescue Ahsoka, and find the world between worlds. Like that's secretive knowledge that almost like the Force itself is deciding not everyone has access to.
Right. Well, and
I'm curious if that changes the way you think about it.
I think it's something that's very inseparable from the conversation, because there is something about the Force that is innately exclusive, right? And whether or not it's elitist is probably dependent on the heart of the person who has it. But with the Force, not everyone's going to have it. And if you have it, you're going to have a one-up on everyone else. It is, not necessarily like a superhero superpower, but it is this kind of next level thing. And I don't think that having the Force necessarily makes you better than anyone else, or like a more important individual than anyone else. Or, I mean, like, maybe you can make an argument for more wise because you have access to this energy source that is giving you some form of knowledge. But like, even then, that's like a gift from this connection. It's not something like born into you.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that, but to kind of use the Spider-Man line, right? Like, with great power comes great responsibility. If you're going to have galactic protectors, why wouldn't it be the people that can tap into the life force? I think
Right.
people look at these stories a lot of times, and like I've kind of gotten this too, because like I've done a couple of threads on Twitter about like how I responded to Rey and the Rise of Skywalker, and like coming up on the discussion of like democratizing the Force and what does that mean, which is a whole other discussion that would be good to have someday. But like there is something innately like separative about having Force powers versus another person, and I think a lot of people look at that then and project having Force powers as having privilege, which isn't right or wrong. It's certainly a lens to watch Star Wars with. But I think it's different, like, because some people want to be like, oh, being born with Force powers is like being born wealthy. You have this one up. And I'm like, you can look at it that way. But, this is going to sound lame, but it's almost like robbing the fun of it when you look at it that way. Like, this is supposed to be a fairy tale, not fairy tale necessarily, but it's supposed to be a fantastical story. It's supposed to be a spiritual story. I think where the Jedi went wrong is that in the prequel trilogy is the Force kind of becomes a privilege instead of a gift. It becomes this thing that makes them elitist instead of this thing that makes them more humble servants of the galaxy. And like the proper response to having the Force is going, I have the life essence of the universe, therefore I must serve the universe. Instead it becomes, well, I understand. I might be getting away from your point, but I think at some level, if you're going to have arbiters of right and wrong or light and dark in the galaxy, it makes sense to have like a light side Force order do that. And in theory, if you think about what the Jedi are supposed to be and not what the Jedi are in the prequel trilogy, I don't think that's wrong. I think where this feels uncomfortable is knowing where the Jedi are not what they're supposed to be in the prequel trilogy.
I mean, and I think it also is interesting because what this secretive nature allows, I mean, if the Jedi were not secretive, then Luke would not be able to do what he thinks he's doing in The Last Jedi by letting the whole thing die. Right? Like, Luke's intention is, I'm the last person that knows any of this, and if I can burn these books and I can die myself, then nobody gets this knowledge at all. Like, I'll just end this whole thing altogether. This ends with me. Like, this is a problem, and it's always been a problem, and so, like, this is it. But if the Jedi were not secretive, like, this gets back to the sort of democratization, not necessarily of the Force, but of whatever knowledge they have about the Force. Like, it's that secret nature that allows Luke to do that. Right? And if every country and every household in the world or in the galaxy has a copy of those books, then whether or not they can read it or use it, like, then it's immortal, right?
Well, and to kind of go the counterpoint to that scene is Force Ghost Yoda's line of there's nothing in the tree that the girl Rey doesn't already possess, which of course is in surface level a cheeky line because Yoda knows Rey took the books, but I don't think it is actually that literal. I don't like.
Sure.
And I mean, this is my own interpretation because obviously I understand Yoda better than anyone else because I have his name. But like, surface level, there's the literal. Yeah, no, she has the books, but I think he's also trying to say being a Jedi is more than reading a bunch of books. And she can commune with the Jedi, even to the extent that we see that she's finally able to do in The Rise of Skywalker. Like, she doesn't need to read the books. Like, they're helpful, and it's a way to connect with before you have it. But, like, maybe this is just me, but if it's, like, read a bunch of books that I have to work really hard to translate or just chat with, like, 20 really cool people, like, I know which one I'm going to do to learn about the Force. And so I think too, there's this idea of maybe like, I don't think it's bad that there's like, maybe this is the difference. Like, when is it sacred and when is it secret? right? When is
Right.
it sacred knowledge that you get because you've earned it and because you've gone through this process by which you gained it, and when is it we're keeping this for ourselves for some sort of selfish reason?
I mean, but I want to come back to this question though, because
Yeah.
we talked a little bit earlier about like the Bogan collection and like this idea there's some knowledge that nobody should have. Like, do you buy that as a premise? Because this is what they're saying, is that some types of knowledge, and again we're talking about like mystical, fantastical,
Right.
magic powers here.
Right.
So I don't know if there's a real world corollary to this, but some types of knowledge are so dangerous that you can't know it without being a problem. And so therefore it's not secretive necessarily, because it's not something I know that I'm not letting you know.
Right.
It's something that I'm saying neither one of us should know. And so it's a different type of secretive there. Does that make sense for you? Does that work for you?
I think it does. If you look at it, like, if we assume the dark side is as corruptive as we've seen, so like you brought up Atrus's Holocron, which of course isn't canon anymore, but even look at something like Momin from from the Soul Vader comics. Like, so often we see dark side stuff, or even with Palpatine.
That mask was in the Bogan collection too,
right.
So like it's
perfect. There's this idea that like the dark side of the Force kind of seeks you out. So it would be one thing if it's like, I as a cognizant adult am going to read this information and then make an informed choice about whether or not I want to use it. But if like literally reading the text possesses you in some way, then there is no consent you can give or a choice you can make with this decision. Like, the idea that you have even looked at the book means that evil is going to come in and kind of corrupt you. And I again think that this is where a lot of like your perspective on things affects stuff, because like we've talked about before, like it's really hard to look at the prequel trilogy, in my opinion, and get an accurate interpretation if you forget that Palpatine is the space devil. Like, if you look at what's going on with the Clone Wars, it's one thing to look at the Jedi and judge what the Jedi did if it was just any other run-of-the-mill galactic war. But the fact that this is literally being orchestrated on both sides by the embodiment, the incarnate version of the Space Devil, kind of changes the rules for me. And the idea in Star Wars is not just that evil exists, but evil seeks you out and seeks to consume you and turn you and corrupt you. I think there's an argument to be made with stuff like what's in the Bogan collection, that if it's possible to study it and not be corrupted, like not Kreia was in Jedi Lost. Kristana, is that her name?
Yeah.
She was not Kreia in my head, because the voice actress really sounded like Kreia. But forgive me, Kevin, I'm sorry. But anyway, I'm sure he watches every week. No, like somebody like that maybe can look at it or something. But, then you have Sifo, and was Sifo driven crazy because he couldn't handle the stuff that he was seeing in the Bogan collection?
Right.
And he was trying to see all the vision. So I think, at least in the context of Star Wars, whether or not you believe in possessive evil powers in real life or not, at least in the context of Star Wars, I think there's a good argument to be made that some things should not be known.
I mean, and I guess my counterpoint, and I don't think that this, I hate saying I'm going to play devil's advocate, because I don't want to be like the white dude here, raising my hand, say I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second, but I get enough of that in my day job. But I'm curious about the counterpoint though. If does the secrecy and the nature of the secret nature of Jedi dogma, is that what allows the space devil to manipulate them? Right? Like Palpatine is the space devil, but were it not for 1,000 years of secrecy, then that plan doesn't go as well. I mean, maybe I think Palpatine would have come up with something else if it had not been like, I think that's just what I think about Palpatine. He's willing to be zombified and possess people, so who knows what lengths he would go to. Exactly. But I think it at least speaks to the methods that he used work, because the Jedi chose to be that secret. I mean, at least with Anakin,
right.
it does, because Anakin is so easily manipulated. But when all Palpatine has to say is, "Hey, they're not telling you something that you want to know, and I can," right? Like, and I think that's an important thing. And maybe I'm misreading this. It's my interpretation too.
No.
But I think when Palpatine says you can't learn this from a Jedi, he's not saying a Jedi can't do this, but a Jedi will never let you do this, right?
That's
and Anakin is hearing this at the time where he feels like since Attack of the Clones, Anakin felt like people were intentionally holding him back.
Right.
And so, now it's that same thing that Palpatine is able to use against them.
Right. Welcome, Bear. And Cal says some of this discussion reminds him of the first and third season of The Legend of Korra, thought applied to the Force instead of building. So I've seen The Last Airbender, but I have not watched Legend of Korra. So unfortunately, I cannot speak to that specific point.
The only thing I know about either of them is a song.
Speaking of secrets, Secret Tunnel has definitely come in my head a couple of times when we were talking about secrets. And I haven't seen Last Airbender since college, but it's good. And I've been meaning to rewatch it and watch Korra now that it's on Netflix. It was not an intentional not watching of Korra. It was just never happened not watching of Korra. But that does get me interested though, and bumping that up on my priorities list. Yeah. So I think you're right that Palpatine definitely manipulated the Jedi for what they were, and he 100% knew how to do that, and for however long he's been around, which in Legends he was just a normal human with a normal human lifespan. In canon, I guess it depends on what the inevitable "I am all the Sith" line comes to mean, because the way Star Wars is usually they'll give you like this really interesting. Oh, another person. I turned myself up. Am I still quiet, guys? I'll turn myself up more.
You can just turn me down if you have to.
I could, yeah. It looks like I'm getting, so I don't know, maybe there's just an issue with YouTube. It's been mad at me today. I appreciate you guys telling me, though. You think I would enjoy Korra? I probably would. I liked The Last Airbender, so, like, it was just, Korra came out at a time when I had less time to watch TV, is all. I only saw Last Airbender after it was out, so that's also part of it. But what was I saying? Oh, so like Palpatine definitely knew how to manipulate the position that the Jedi were in. But depending on whether or not they make, whether or not he has a normal human lifespan, and so he wouldn't have necessarily been able to orchestrate this, or he's been around jumping from body to body for a while, which I think could become an eventual possibility. Like how much of it the situation he created, but he definitely used it. And like you're saying, the Sith keep secrets, and it's almost like he kind of knew how to manipulate the secrecy of the Jedi because he was also a secret person, but better at it, if that makes sense. No, I think it comes down to, I think at the end of the day, what I would say is the Jedi at some level, because they can connect to the Force. Like, I think it's important to remember that this is just not like a superpower. The Force is not just lifting rocks, right? Which is even grumpy old Octo Luke understands that. Like, there's more to the Force than just you can do cool stuff. That if you have that ability to connect, like, I think there is some responsibility on, if not the Jedi, like someone, to keep an eye on the Force's will, and the Force's will is for balance, because there will always be people who want to use the Force to create imbalance. And to that extent, you need to have special temples that only you can get into, to have a place to train and learn. And I think the thing about kyber crystals is they're not just crystals. The fact that they are basically living, Force-sensitive crystals kind of changes it, and is why they can feel a little bit more ownership to them, because they really do have, even in Catalyst, like, Galen says that he's starting to have insomnia from being around the kybers in a way that the Jedi are never described as having that. So it's almost like prolonged exposure to kybers without force sensitivity can mess with you. Maybe, I don't know.
Right.
So I don't know. Maybe it's just the Jedi apologist in me, but I would say that the Jedi have some right to these things.
Is there something, though, to the idea of if I'm thinking to the Clone Wars episode again with Ilum, afterward. I don't remember the name of the episode. You might, but where it's the younglings and they're with the droid.
Yep.
That's helping them make their lightsabers.
The David.
Right, like
droid.
like the droid has that knowledge.
Yeah.
So is there something to the idea that we can let a droid, be the repository of this, so that somebody has like a record of this knowledge, and somebody, that way there's a way of knowing what you don't know, right? Because part of the secrecy is you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And if there was like a droid that Anakin could go to and say, hey, is there a way that I can keep somebody from dying? And the droid says, well, yes, but that's a super duper terrible idea. Right. Then Anakin probably would have done it anyway, because Anakin's Anakin.
Right.
But I don't know. Is there anything to like using non-force sensitive, non-living droids as the arbiter of the information?
Well,
because then it's not the Jedi having to maintain that secrecy. Mm-hmm. It's not the Sith wanting to manipulate it. It's, an unfeeling to the extent that droids are unfeeling.
And not corruptible by the dark side, yeah? Like a droid could, in theory, know the evils of the dark side.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't have a connection to the living force, which maybe L3 would have something to say about that. But like, if they don't have a connection to the living force, then it's not dangerous for them to know. Well, and it's funny too. I think it's amusing in Rise of Skywalker that 3PO is allowed to read Sith. He just can't speak it.
Yeah.
So like, he in theory could have taken them to the coordinates.
Like he knew what it said. He just couldn't tell them what it said.
And so that's kind of interesting. It's like, it's not that they erase knowledge of the language. They just refuse to let droids speak it for some reason. But, is that just typical inefficient government bureaucracy that has a rule written in a weird way? Or is there like a use for that? Is it because they wanted the knowledge to be kept somewhere, and in theory, a droid is not corruptible.
Right.
And so that's
unless there's the built-in loophole that Bobby Frick is, we'll just wipe his brain, and then no problem, right?
It'll be fine. One day we'll get the James Luceno novel that will detail every little thing about the government policies involving the Sith language, and then we'll be fine.
Yep, I look forward to it already.
But yeah, I don't know, I keep sitting around because like I really can't put and I feel like I'm repeating myself now, but I really can't come down on how I feel about this, because it really comes down to how much you trust the Jedi. So like we're talking about this, but like, what if it wasn't the Jedi? What if it was another force sensitive order that follows the light that's just not the Jedi, and they're like, we have a bunch of kyber crystals? Like, I guess it's at what level is the Force choosing people, right? Like we talked about the chosen one to bring balance to the Force, and we had a whole discussion on what does chosenness mean, and is Rey another chosen one, and that sort of thing. But like, do the Jedi have more of a claim because the Force has chosen them, or would the Force choose somebody who's just, light side but hasn't followed the Jedi path? But like, I don't know. I feel like this one idea branches off into like a million other things that people have been fighting about for a while.
I mean, and I think Revan is an interesting way to think about this too, because like the Jedi say, hey, you can still be the awesomeness that is Revan. We're just gonna erase all the bad stuff we don't want you to know from your mind. Right? Like we'll take all the bad knowledge away and only leave you with the good knowledge.
Right.
And therefore we will have redeemed you without you having to redeem yourself. We'll just, section,
right.
What is when you do it with your hard drive and you can like run to
partition.
But we're gonna partition that part of your brain, and we won't let you run Linux and realize what we partition.
But then we'll slowly trick you into like subconsciously revealing that information. Cal, good luck with your advancement exam. I hope that goes well for you. Let us know how it goes.
Or certain organizations run by the devotees, the former science fiction authors, that operate largely out of California, that will go unnamed. Like, that's their whole thing, right? You're not advanced yet enough to know the secrets,
right.
And once you pay us enough money, I mean, not pay us enough money, but like advance through your knowledge and cross the bridge and stuff, then you're worthy of having the knowledge.
Then you can have it, right? And like that's really what it comes back to, is like I can see why somebody could look at the Jedi, especially if they don't know the Jedi very well, and be like, well, they're just like this weird cult that hides renewable energy from the world.
Yeah.
And so it's our perspective is different because we've spent time with the Jedi and getting to know them and what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I find it, even though I keep going in a circle, I do find this interesting because it's, on the one hand, it's really cool to think of like Ilum as this place with this really kick-butt temple that the Jedi can do, and then on the other hand, it's like, okay, but like who owns Ilum? Like,
right.
What's the permits here? Like who does what? How do you decide if a Jedi can put up one of these temples somewhere? I don't know. I find it interesting.
I mean, and I guess maybe part of the limitation that the Jedi would say that has is we're not putting up a temple everywhere. We're putting up a temple in all of the places where the Force is strong enough that we need a temple.
Right.
Right. So it's not like we would want to just put it. It's not like I'm playing Civ, right? And I want to expand as much as I can, and I'll just build where I want to. Like, I'm building this in the one spot on the map where I can. And it just so happens to be Ilum or Dantooine or Coruscant.
I can't remember the name of the planet, but there's a planet in Resistance where they put the Jedi Temple over the Sith Temple, and then and then Kaz got trapped in the Sith Temple because of course he did, and then antics ensued. But like,
I mean, that was the canon explanation for the Jedi Temple on Coruscant too, wasn't it? That it was, or the Legends, I meant explanation.
No, I think it's canon. I think it's canon. It was.
I was thinking that was Plagueis that said that.
But I think it's in Tarkin also, which is Musino carrying it over.
No, maybe so.
So it's been a while since I read Tarkin, and you would remember Tarkin better than I would, but I'm pretty sure that Tarkin also established that, but I can't remember. But yeah, it was in Plagueis. You are correct. But so then it's like, well, no, we have to... but even on the one hand, it's like from the Jedi's perspective of, we have to balance things out, and so we have to cover up all these dark side, next side. But on the other hand, it's like, okay, so you need to put your temple on top of these other people's temple because you don't like their temple. Like, it's so much of it is it makes sense if you know all of the information, but if you don't know all the information, which
is the problem of keeping the information, right? If you knew what I knew, then you would understand why you can't know what I know, right? Like, that's, I don't know.
Well, and I feel like this is like a large galactic fantasy scale version of the same thing of like parenthood, and I'm not going to tell my kids everything, or like management versus regular employees, or government versus citizens. It's like the idea of Then you blow it up to, but now it's Force users who can literally talk to the essence of the universe. And maybe that's why it's a thing to wrestle with, right? Because it's a thing we've been wrestling with since humanity.
What they need is a Force VR experience in the galaxy far, far away so that everyone can experience it and know what it's like. And then... We'll democratize it that way. Then you'll understand.
Oh man, that can you imagine? Everyone just does. What was it in Legends? Glitter stem that made you low key connect to the Force, and then there were like, if you were a glit biter, you were like the worst addict of. I think it was in the Jedi Academy trilogy where there was like the guy on Kessel who's a glit biter. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's so much weird stuff all over. But then, that, I don't know, because then, so you've read the newest Thrawn novel. I have not yet. But this is stuff that popped up in the first 3 of Zahn's new novels, is this idea of the Skywalkers, right? Like the Force sensitive Chiss children, who are hyperdrive computers.
That's a super duper huge deal in the new novel too, by the way.
Yeah, that's my understanding, because I haven't read it, and I don't feel like I've had too much of it spoiled for me, but I just see that conversation pop up again in discussing the new. But that's another group of people that's not. I mean, the Chiss aren't even looked at as a Force sensitive group, but
right.
or like even a group that's pursuing the Force. And Thrawn as a character. Thrawn as a character in Legends, where he's far more villainous than he is in current canon, hates the Force because he can't look at art and understand it.
Right.
And then to kind of, like, maybe if you're new to the Chiss because you're new to canon, that doesn't have the same weight. But for me to think about the Chiss having, like, this connection to the Force and, like, this kind of own thing that isn't really a secret because they're keeping it a secret. It's a secret because everything about the Chiss is elusive and secret.
Right.
It adds this element there too of like, oh, there's people well outside of what the Jedi can control.
Right.
And well, it's even just people outside of the Republic, people like Anakin, who don't necessarily get spotted by the Jedi, and it's, I don't know, I feel like I'm gonna have to sit with this a little bit more, but I think at the end of the day, the answer comes down to, do you see the Jedi as having the right to make that decision? And in my opinion, as a Jedi apologist, if the Jedi are operating under what they should be, so not necessarily what the prequel Jedi were, but what the Jedi are as people who are actively trying to seek out the will of the Force and actively trying to stand for balance, whatever that means. Like, I think it's okay that they get to make these decisions, because I think as trained, disciplined people within an order that has rules and regulations and they maintain themselves, they can decide, like, who better to decide, like, what's right or wrong in a Force sensitive setting. But the problem is they're mortal and fallible like anybody else, and then you kind of get where we get sometimes in Star Wars.
And I think my answer ends up being at the same destination, but takes a different path to get there, because I think I trust the Force to make that decision, and I think the Force has chosen the Jedi. So I don't think it's the Jedi themselves, but I think the Force has chosen the Jedi to be the arbiters of that decision, and I trust the Force.
That makes sense. I'm there. I can buy that as well. So that's really what I'd say. I apologize if this stream was a little laggy, or like if you're watching this in playback, there's a couple bits that got cut out. I was mostly here, but the internet was arguing with me a little bit. But thank you guys for being here with this. It was good to just have like a in-depth thing again, because I feel like the last couple of things we've done has been more like, here's a trailer and let's talk about whatever. And so it was nice to have some of this. As always, if you guys ever have suggestions, or like if you want to follow up to anything we talked about, check out our Discord, which there should be a link in the description. That's a great place, or tweet at us, I guess. Discord, I'm more likely to see it and remember it versus it getting lost in our Twitter feed.
Can you find me on TikTok?
You can find Django on TikTok specifically.
Professor_Django. Come follow me on TikTok.
For like the remaining month that you can.
Bear's there. Bear knows all about my TikTok.
You send me quite a few of them.
Yeah, well, you're special. I've decided to let you have the knowledge of my TikTok.
I get the secret knowledge. But yeah, so
secret knowledge of the TikTok.
It's good. It's good. But yeah, thank you guys so much. And I don't know if we're back to having regular weekly streamcasts, but I don't know that we ever really had regular weekly streamcasts to begin with anyway.
So yeah, join us every week on Wednesday, and never missed one yet.
Nope. We have never missed a week in our lives. And
weekly as frick.
Weekly as frick. We will talk to you guys later. Bye.
Bye.